right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me back. I really do appreciate it. I'm glad to be here tonight. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. We're going to get into some science this evening, and we're going to discuss your DNA and how essential oils can be used to help protect your DNA. So I have a whole class on this called Protecting Your DNA. You get all my classes at starfishsense.com. And the way I got into essential oils is because my wife experimented on me with essential oils, and real men let their wives experiment on them with essential oils, and that's how I got into it. So I gave my story in the last talk about how I was in the pharmaceutical industry doing research on antiviral medicines, and my wife got into essential oils for aromatherapy and just making the house smell nice and that type of thing. And I didn't really think they had anything of value to offer towards health because of my Western training. But then after a series of different events that happened in our home where I saw the efficacy of the oils in a very real way, while my wife experimenting on me and the kids, it made me into a believer. And then I started studying them and how they work molecularly, and then starting putting some classes together to help people understand how they actually work. Because I think there was like an information gap there, where people knew they work, but they just didn't really know in a simple way how to explain what they're really doing when they get inside your body. So that's what started me on this pathway of developing all this education. I wrote a book called How Do Essential Oils Work? It's a very simple book. You can get it at the website. It's simple to understand. You don't need a scientific background or anything to understand it. I go over the basic concepts of what happens once these oils get into your body, what they do inside your cells, and all of that. And you can get all of my classes on one memory stick, which I mailed to you, a USB, and it has, 15 classes. Each class has multiple modules. It has all the videos, has all the slides. You can see a list of the classes that I have there. I also have recipes on the memory stick. And in fact, the recipes I'm going to be discussing tonight are on this memory stick, a frequently asked question database, and all of that on one memory stick. So if you were to buy all of these different classes at one time, it would be twice the amount than just getting them all on one stick. You get all the slides as well in JPEG and PDF formats, and you can teach your own classes using the material. Get that at starfishsense.com. Okay, so I'm going to move something around on my screen because something's blocking from the Zoom here. All right, so this is the number one reason why I believe everyone should use essential oils. Like every person on the planet should use them on a regular basis. So this is a very good, if you actually grasp the content in this class, you will be able to explain to people why they should use essential oils on a very basic level, just for one thing alone, and that is to protect their DNA, okay? So we're going to discuss DNA and why it's important to protect it. So DNA is the molecule that exists inside every single one of our cells. So in our body, there's about 30 trillion cells. And inside the nucleus of each cell, there's a full copy of all of the genetics, or all the chromosomes that make up the human genome. And so in each cell, there's about 3 billion letters that are strung together in a genetic code that make up the 23 pairs of chromosomes, okay? 3 billion pieces of letters or information that are strung together. So that's the instructions on how your cells function. All of the proteins in your cells and how they work. It's the architectural set of blueprints that tell the human body how to be constructed from one cell, as well as how to function on a day-to-day basis. So DNA is the hard drive of your cells. It's basically got all of the information there for your entire human body just from one cell. You can actually get all the information you need to build a human body from the DNA in just one cell, because it's copied exactly in all 30 trillion cells. Now, the DNA inside one of our cells is wound up. So it's very long. It's only atomic layer thin, but it's very long. So inside one cell, the the DNA would stretch out 6 feet long, okay? So this has to be wound up into the nucleus in something that's microscopic, and it can't get tangled up, and it has to be copied every time the cell divides into a second exact copy, so the cell divides, each copy goes to the daughter cells, right? So all of that has to be unwound, copied, put back together without any kind of tangling. So this is an amazing feat, and I can go over how that actually works, but I don't have time tonight. But so you have 30 trillion cells, each with 6 feet of DNA. So if you were to take all the DNA in your body and stretch it out and put it together end to end, does anyone have any guesses of how long that would be? So if anybody wants to hit the chat window with some guesses of how long you think that would be from one human body. Okay, so the answer is 34 billion miles. So that would be 1.4 million times around the Earth, circumference of the Earth, or 12 times to Pluto and back. Okay, which is the furthest planet. Well, it's not a planet now, but it's going to be again. So, but 34 billion miles just from one human body. That's how much DNA we have, and that's the And if you were to look at that 34 billion miles on a microscopic level, there are letters, genetic sequence of letters that form the instructions to make the human body. 1.4 million times. So it's amazing, right? Now, all of those instructions in our DNA are constantly under attack. All right, so there's constant mutations taking place. On average, in each cell, there's about 1 million different genetic insults to the DNA that cause a genetic damage to the DNA per day, per cell, 1 million. And so if this were actually able to accumulate, it would cause cancer very rapidly. So in our cells, there are enzymes or proteins or I like to call them nanomachines that read the DNA and look for damage, look for mutations, and then repair the DNA. They're called DNA repair proteins. And there's about 130 different ones of them inside our body, in our cells, that each have a different role to play to repair the DNA. They scan the DNA, they look for damage, they look for specific types of damage, they cut the DNA out where they find damage, they cut a small piece out, then they copy the right sequence of genetic information to repair that DNA back into that place where it was spliced out, and then they glue it back together. Okay, and there's different types of DNA damage that can happen, so there's different types of enzymes to repair the different types of DNA damage. So this is happening every day in every cell, 1 million times per cell per day, and it's being repaired. If this didn't occur, then we would all die at a very young age from cancer. In fact, there's, any mutations in any of these genes can cause cancer quite readily. So there's a genetic disorder called xeroderma pigmentosum, for example, that children can have, and basically they become sensitive to UV rays from sun, and so they develop skin cancer at a very young age just by being exposed to sunlight, because when your skin is exposed to UV from the sun, it actually damages the DNA. Just me sitting here in the light impinging on my skin is actually causing DNA damage. But we have enzymes that repair that DNA as it's happening, okay? But people with this specific genetic mutation, they have a mutation in one of the enzymes that repairs the damage from the UV rays, and so the DNA just accumulates the damage and they get cancer at a very young age. So there's 130 different genes for these DNA repair enzymes, and if we have any genetic damage in any of these genes or genetic mutations, then we could have an accelerated rate of accumulation of DNA mutations because we're not repairing the DNA at the same rate at which mutations are being developed, right? So there's an equilibrium. There's a certain rate at which DNA mutations are being developed by DNA being damaged and copied from cell to cell. But then we have these enzymes that are keeping up with that damage. And if those enzymes do it at an equal or faster rate than the damage is occurring, we're good. But if those enzymes either slow down or don't work properly because of mutations, right, that are in those genes for the DNA repair enzymes, then what can happen is the rate at which mutations accumulate will increase past the actual ability of the cell to repair. And so the average cancer cell has something like 30,000 DNA mutations that have accumulated over the years. So this is not something that happens overnight. Cancer is something that happens over a lifetime from an accumulation of mutations that creep into the code, genetic code, as it's passed on from generation to generation as the cells divide, that don't get repaired by the enzymes for one reason or another. Now, your immune system, if a cell becomes cancerous, your immune system should be able to find that cell and kill it, all right, and take it out of commission. So we have an immune surveillance system in our bodies that scan our bodies for cancerous cells that get to this level of accumulation where the cell now is cancerous or precancerous, and then the immune system, white blood cells, attack the cancerous cell before it has a chance to continue to divide and become an issue. Now, if our immune system becomes suppressed for some reason, right, if we have immune suppression or a faulty immune system, that's where the cancer can escape even the immune response. So we have different levels of protection to keep our bodies from developing cancer, but if any one of those layers fail for some reason or slow down or get sluggish, then over time cancer can develop. So this is one of the enzymes that, just showing the molecular structure of one of the enzymes that scan the DNA, look for mutations, and then repair it as it finds it. So to give you a schematic of how this works, so you have DNA, and on the DNA you have genes. Genes are just little segments of the DNA that encode a very small segment of instructions to make one protein. So you have about 30,000 genes in the human genome. In that 3 billion letters of code, you have about 30,000 genes. Each gene encodes for a specific protein, and that protein has some function in your cell. Okay? Now, when the cell divides, this DNA has to be copied into a second strand of DNA that's exactly the same. Okay? So when that happens, if you have some kind of oxidant or reactive oxygen species or carcinogen or anything that can damage the DNA, which I show by this little lightning bolt here and this blue star, that's basically an insult to the DNA where that letter, the genetic letter that's in that gene, and I show here for this example, gene number 3, has been damaged, okay? Now, let's say that the DNA repair enzymes don't catch this damage right here, this blue star, and this DNA is now copied again. So the damage also gets copied. All right, so then if there's another mutation event from an oxidant, a reactive oxygen species, then you get more damage, and this accumulates in the DNA as it continues to divide. So the damage doesn't go away, it just continues to build up, and more gets added. And like I said earlier, the average cancer cell has something like 30,000 of these genetic mutations that have occurred, and it's too much for the cell. The instructions are now too corrupted, and the cell doesn't know when to stop dividing, basically. So, so you can think of it this way. So if you have a car, an automobile, you have a gas pedal and you have a brake. So cells divide. That means they divide, into 2 daughter cells, and then those cells divide, and so on and so forth. But then cells stop dividing. Otherwise, it would be like Jabba the Hutt. It would just be one blob of cells. So cells know when they're supposed to divide, when they're supposed to stop dividing, to form the different structures of our body. So cells have a very controlled program of when they should divide and when they shouldn't. And the genes, there's a set of genes that are basically genes that tell the cell to start dividing. Those are called oncogenes. And then the other types of genes that tell your cells to stop dividing are the brakes. Okay, those are called the tumor suppressor genes. So you have tumor suppressor genes, where are the brakes that tell your cells to stop dividing, and you have oncogenes, which are the gas pedal, that tell your cell to start dividing. So there's a balance between the gas pedal and the brake that makes the cell divide when it's supposed to. Now, as mutations occur in the DNA, what can happen is you can get mutations in either the tumor suppressor genes or the oncogenes or both, okay, the mutations I was showing you here earlier, if one of these genes is one of the tumor suppressor genes or one of the oncogenes, then the gas pedal might become faulty, you get stuck down, or the brake might become faulty so that you can't step on the brake anymore. And when that happens, then the cell doesn't know when to stop dividing. And that's uncontrolled cell growth at that point. It has no more regulatory control over cell division. And so this is how the mutations cause uncontrolled cell growth. Now, if one of the genes is actually, remember I said there's 130 different genes that repair the DNA, those genes are in the DNA. So if those genes themselves, the DNA repair genes, any one of those 130 genes become mutated, then the rate at which the DNA repair system works decreases, and then the rate at which mutations accumulate in the DNA starts to accelerate. So if the mutation in the DNA is pretty random where it occurs, but if it happens to occur in a DNA repair enzyme, then the mutation rate actually increases and it makes it worse. If it actually occurs in one of the tumor suppressor genes or the oncogenes, then that's where you get loss of cell cycle control like I was showing you here. Okay, so this is what happens. So what our goal should be to stop the rate at which our DNA is damaged. We want to slow down the rate at which these mutations occur. So we need to know what causes these mutations in our DNA so that we can stop them. So what are the causes of DNA damage? So there's endogenous causes, meaning that things that are inside of our body from normal cellular function, metabolism that can occur from our own body. Not anything external that we're taking in, just our own physiological makeup can cause DNA damage. For example, when DNA is actually copied, it's not perfect. So the enzymes that copy the DNA make a mistake once every 10 million letters. So there's a mistake that made. Now it has proofreading capability to proofread and say, okay, I made a mistake. Let me back up and repair that and move on. But sometimes that proofreading capability doesn't work either, and then the mutations get permanently embedded into the genetic code. So there's endogenous causes, and one other form of endogenous would be your own immune system. So when you have inflammation in your body, when your immune system becomes activated when it should not be activated, your immune system will actually produce what they call reactive oxygen species. And it's actually making these reactive oxygen species because it's trying to fight something, a bacteria, a virus, a parasite. And it's trying to neutralize that foreign invader. And so it uses reactive oxygen species to do that, because reactive oxygen species are extremely damaging to any kind of biological molecule, excluding viruses and bacteria. The problem is that your cells become collateral damage. They also get exposed to the bathing of the reactive oxygen species from the immune system, and those reactive oxygen species will cause mutations in your DNA. So your own immune system, if it's activated through chronic inflammation, can actually accelerate the accumulation of mutations in your DNA. So then that's endogenous, right? That's the stuff happening in our own body. But then there's exogenous causes that come from outside our body, like carcinogens from the food, the water, things we breathe in, the things we put on our body, the chemicals we put on our body, for lotions, everything, tens of thousands of different toxic chemicals that are found in all the different products we use can become carcinogenic because they can cause reactive oxygen species and cause damage to our DNA. Ionizing radiation, which would be like UV rays from the sun, can cause damage to our DNA, like I explained earlier, with that one genetic abnormality that can cause skin cancer. Chronic inflammation, which I already explained, can cause reactive oxygen species, ROS, which can damage DNA. And then free radicals, oxidants from our environment can also cause DNA damage. So what are reactive oxygen species? So you've heard of free radicals. You know, free radicals are bad. Free radicals are everywhere, okay? Your body makes free radicals. You know, don't be scared of free radicals. It's just a balance of free radicals with everything else. So free radicals are a type of reactive oxygen species, but also there's non-radical reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species is a general term for something that has oxygen in it, but it also is an oxidant, meaning it wants to strip electrons away from something else. So an oxidant is nothing more than a molecule that wants to take away an electron from another molecule. So everything is made up of neutrons, protons, and electrons, right? And so they have a balance of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But if an oxidant comes along, it can take one of those electrons away from that molecule. Now it's missing an electron. That creates a very precarious situation for that molecule. So I show you here is this blue molecule, which is a reactive oxygen species, and it steals an electron away from this green molecule, some molecule in our cell. It could be protein, a lipid, a carbohydrate, or our DNA. So it's stealing an electron away from this molecule. Why does it do that? It's because the reactive oxygen species, by definition, loves electrons or has a higher affinity for electrons than the molecule it's stealing it from. It's sort of like a bully. It's like a bully on the playground comes up, hey kid, give me your lunch money. And the kid has to give the guy the lunch money because the kid's bigger and stronger than them. Well, the reactive oxygen species is bigger and stronger in terms of being able to strip an electron away, and it pulls the electron away from this molecule. Now it's left without an electron. So what happens then? So this molecule has an electron stolen away from it. Now, it's going to steal one away from another molecule if it's stronger than that molecule. So reactive oxygen species strips it away from molecule 1. Molecule 1 then tries to find someone that has less affinity for electrons than it does, it's weaker, and it steals it from that. And then that molecule steals it from a third, and it creates a chain reaction. So one reactive oxygen species in our body can create a chain reaction where these electrons are being stolen away in this chain reaction of molecules that interact with each other. Now what can happen is the nucleus of the cell is where the DNA resides, right? So that's in the central portion of our cell. When a reactive oxygen species comes into our cell, it's usually coming in from the outside through the cell membrane. And so what happens is it'll usually oxidize or steal an electron away from a lipid, okay, a phospholipid in the membrane of the cell, because that's what it first comes in contact with. Then the lipid might steal one away from a protein, and then the protein might steal one away until it eventually gets to the nucleus. This chain reaction gets to the DNA, so the last molecule in this chain will be the DNA, and it will steal an electron away from the DNA. Now at that point, that's where you have this mutation. The DNA has now been mutated where that reactive oxygen species has stolen an electron away. What happens is when that DNA gets copied, it makes a mistake there and puts the wrong letter there. And so now you have a mutation in your DNA. The instructions in that part of the DNA are now corrupted if it's not repaired, right? If it doesn't get repaired, then you have a corruption in the instruction. So that's how an oxidative chain reaction starts, but it starts with one reactive oxygen species. A free radical is a reactive oxygen species, but there's also non-radical reactive oxygen species. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the endogenous and the exogenous. So reactive oxygen species, like I said earlier, can be endogenous, meaning that they come from our own body. So they're produced as a normal part of cellular metabolism. So when you break down food for energy, for example, you're producing reactive oxygen species in your mitochondria. The mitochondria that actually do the oxidative phosphorylation to produce ATP from sugar and all of that, you learned about in high school biology. Just normal cellular respiration, oxidative phosphorylation, a breakdown of glucose into energy, that normal metabolic process that occur in the mitochondria of your cells, those produce reactive oxygen species. So when you're exercising, when you're eating, all of that generates reactive oxygen species. So reactive oxygen species are not evil, okay? The body produces them for a very specific reason. So an example would be the superoxide anion, hydrogen peroxide, and the hydroxyl radical, or three that our cells make as a part of normal cellular metabolism. But We have enzymes, antioxidative enzymes, that neutralize these reactive oxygen species so that they can't go do any further they can't do any damage to the nucleus of the cell to damage the DNA. So we have different enzymes that neutralize these different reactive oxygen species that our cells normally make. Now, there's also reactive oxygen species that are produced, like I said earlier, by our own immune system from chronic inflammation. The white blood cells will basically bathe the tissues in reactive oxygen species wherever they're activated to try to kill some foreign pathogen or parasite or virus or bacteria to try to get rid of an infection. And these reactive oxygen species are there to kill the bacteria or the virus. But if you have chronic inflammation in your body where your immune system is activated when it shouldn't be, or an autoimmune disorder, then your immune system can be activated all the time, and you're constantly being bathed with these reactive oxygen species in your tissues, and then that can lead to uncontrolled cell division later on down the road. So exogenous sources of reactive oxygen species, obviously pollutants, smoking, tobacco, xenobiotics. Those xenobiotics are anything that are foreign to our human body that's not natural. Chemicals in our products, ionizing radiation, ozone itself, pesticides, solvents, and heavy metals. So here's the thing. If you're using essential oils from a company that doesn't do the quality control like Young Living does, it doesn't have the seed to seal process, there's rampant issues with adulteration in the essential oil industry. Lots of papers published on this where they sampled oils from around the world and found them littered with heavy metals, solvents, and other adulterants. So you're trying to use essential oils to be healthy, and they're adulterated with these other things. They're going to damage your DNA. All right, so it's actually going to do the opposite of what you want them to do. But these pesticides and solvents and heavy metals can come from our food sources and other materials that we put on our body. So what are the negative effects of reactive oxygen species? So there's a balance between reactive oxygen species and antioxidants, which neutralize them, which I'm going to get into here in a second of how those actually work. But so when you have a reactive oxygen species, the first thing it normally damages, like I said earlier, are the lipids in your cell membrane. So the cell membrane is made out of lipids or fat or phospholipids. And so if those become oxidized, it can create a chain reaction like I showed you earlier and oxidize other molecules all the way to the central portion of the cell where the DNA resides. It can oxidize structural proteins and enzymes, and that can happen, but those molecules are actually replaced. So proteins are replaced on a continual basis. They're constantly regenerated. Lipids are constantly regenerated. So if those get oxidized, they'll get replaced. So it's not that bad of a thing. The problem is when that chain reaction gets to the DNA, that when the DNA becomes damaged and the repair enzymes don't catch it and the DNA gets copied, that damage is permanent in that cell and every cell derived from that cell. Doesn't mean every cell in your body has that damage now. Just that one cell does, okay? But if that's a stem cell or a pluripotent cell that divides and replaces the tissues in your body, then over time, that genetic defect will become represented in a larger portion of cells in your body as that cell continues to divide and produce daughter cells. Okay, so that's what happens with reactive oxygen species. That's why they're bad. Now, what can this cause? It can cause inflammation in the body, chronic inflammation, and it's going to lead to all kinds of aging disorders, premature aging, skin wrinkling, all of that, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, atherosclerosis, heart disease, stroke, eye diseases like macular degeneration, arthritis, all of these things. All these aging disorders come down to one thing. It's DNA being damaged slowly over time from oxidative events and other events. So if I call this the Ross cycle, it's something that I came up with as a model. So chronic inflammation in your body, your immune system is activated for some reason that when it shouldn't be. Usually inflammation you want to be acute, meaning that it has a specific time that it's activated for a specific reason. You have an infection, you have a cut, you have a wound, you have a parasite. Inflammation will be activated and it has a beginning and an end. It's acute. That's good. That's what you want. What you don't want is chronic inflammation, which is when your immune system is activated all the time, it's hyperactivated, and it's in an inflammatory state all the time for some reason. And that inflammation generates reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species damages the tissue, which creates more inflammation, and it becomes a cycle. Over time, as this happens, the DNA is accumulating mutations, and then the cells start to, at some point, when the mutations reach a certain threshold, the cell goes into a condition where it has uncontrolled cell growth, and that gets entered into the cycle. So we talked about this chain reaction that occurs. Steals an electron, and that steals an electron, etc. So how do antioxidants work? This is how an antioxidant works. So here in yellow, I show the antioxidant. And what an antioxidant does is the best thing it can do, the best scenario, is it goes up to the reactive oxygen species and says, hey, reactive oxygen species, I know you like electrons. I'm going to give you an electron. It donates an electron to the reactive oxygen species, makes the reactive oxygen species happy. Reactive oxygen species now doesn't steal one away from the green molecule because it's been made happy because the antioxidant donated an electron to the reactive oxygen species. Antioxidants are very generous in that way. So that's the best thing that can happen. Now, what if the reactive oxygen species has already stolen one away from the green guy? Well, the antioxidant can say, okay, I see you've already stolen one away from the green guy, but I'm going to donate one to the green guy, make him happy. That way he doesn't continue the chain reaction. So it stops the chain reaction by donating an electron here. Or if it's the second molecule, donate one here. So the antioxidant will try to blunt or quench or stop or block this chain reaction from occurring, either from the initial event from the reactive oxygen species or some downstream reaction. The antioxidant loves to give away an electron. It can give one away. Now, you might ask, well, the antioxidant gives an electron away. It's now it's missing an electron. Why doesn't it try to steal one away from someone else now that it's missing an electron, just like a chain reaction? Well, what makes an antioxidant is once it gives an electron away, it's stable, and it doesn't want to steal one away from someone else. So these other molecules, if an electron is taken from it or it gives one to someone else, right, it's not happy, and it has to steal one from someone else to become happy again. But an antioxidant can actually have an electron taken from it, or it can donate it, however you want to look at it. Once that electron's gone, the antioxidant's like, you know what, I'm okay. I don't need to steal one from someone else. I'm stable. And so it actually stopped the reaction from occurring. It didn't propagate it. So that's how an antioxidant works. So we have antioxidants in our cells that do this, like glutathione. You've heard of glutathione. This is a natural antioxidant that our cells make. It's a tripeptide. You can actually take it as a supplement too. You can take reduced glutathione. Glutathione is an antioxidant your cells makes, and it's actually at the bottom of what they call the redox cycle. So it generates the electrons in the redox cycle so that you can continually have antioxidant capabilities in your cells. So glutathione is a great thing to have. Uric acid, bilirubin, I've already mentioned the enzymes that actually neutralize the different antioxidants that occur naturally in our cells, the reactive oxygen species that our cells naturally produce from metabolism, like the mitochondria. There's enzymes in our cells that neutralize those. Vitamin E and vitamin C are very good antioxidants. The whole slew of flavonoids. Flavonoids are plant-based and fruit-based, in plants, vegetables and fruits. They make tens of thousands of different flavonoid molecules that are all very highly potent and antioxidant in nature. CoQ10, carotenoids like beta carotene, those are antioxidants in nature. So these are all different types of antioxidants. Some of them we get them from our diet. Some of them are already produced by our body. All right. But here's the one thing I want, go back to my original question is what's the number one reason why everyone should use essential oils? And it's because essential oils actually make the structure of the molecules themselves make them the most powerful antioxidants on the planet. And I want to show you why. Why is that? All right. Remember I said earlier that an antioxidant is a molecule that can give an electron away. But once it gives an electron away to neutralize the reactive oxygen species or the chain, right? Once it gives that electron away, it's perfectly happy. Why is it perfectly happy? Well, there's two reasons why it could be perfectly happy. One is the molecule itself has a bond system called a conjugated bond system. So what that means is if you look at the chemical bonds in this molecule here, you don't even have to be a chemist, and you can see a pattern here. You can see a single line and a double line. A single, double, single, double. There's a pattern here in this molecule. We have a single bond and then a double bond. Then you have a single and a double. Anytime you have a series of single bonds and double bonds, that's called a conjugated bond system, and that molecule is an antioxidant. This molecule, beta carotene, okay, has conjugated bond system, alternating single double bonds. All right, why is that? So once this molecule gives an electron away, all right, the electrons in this conjugated bond system will spread out across this entire molecule. It's called resonance, and the electron just kind of like smooths out in this big cloud of electrons, and it doesn't have to steal one away from someone else. It's still stable, even though it gave one away, because it shares that loss with all of these other electrons in this conjugated bond system. So it doesn't feel the impact of the loss that much like some other molecule would. All right, and so anytime you have a conjugated bond system like this, it's very antioxidant in nature. The other type of molecule, which is just really a derivative of this molecule, if you take this molecule here and you wrap it around in a loop, you get this, right? You have single bond, single, double, and you just make a loop. That's called a phenol ring. So if you have an OH group, there's phenolic ring. So this is a conjugated bond system, but instead of being in a linear sequence, it's in a circle. Okay? So these types of molecules, anything with phenolic rings or conjugated linear molecules, are very antioxidative in nature. Guess what essential oil molecules are? They're both. So you have essential oil molecules that have phenolic rings. You have essential oil molecules that are conjugated bond system. And the reason for that is because the basic molecule that builds essential oils is called isoprene. All right, so this is the chemical structure of isoprene. And you can see this is the basic building block, like the Lego, to build the essential oil molecules. So this one molecule here called isoprene has a double bond, a single bond, and then a double bond. Right? Double, single, double. Now, if you string these together, you get a linear chain of single, double, double, single, double, right? So if you build essential oil molecules from this one basic building block called isoprene, then you get conjugated bond system. So isoprene, if you think of it just as a block, isoprene is this guy. If you count the number of carbons in this molecule, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is called a 5-carbon molecule. If you put 2 together, you'll have 10. If you put 3, you'll have 15. So one isoprene unit has 5 carbons. It's called isoprene. If you put 2 of them together, you have what they call a monoterpene. You've heard that with essential oils if you studied them for any length of time. You've heard people say monoterpenes. You've heard people say sesquiterpenes, diterpenes. These are all built off this same molecule, isoprene, just strung together like Legos. All right, so if you have 2, you have a monoterpene. If you had 3, you have a sesquiterpene. That means it has 15 carbons. If you had another 5 carbons, another isoprene unit, you have a diterpene. It has 20 carbons now. Now, if you go up another there's an actually a 25, but no one ever talks about it. They go right to the 30. So that they go to a triterpene, C30, and then a tetraterpene, C40. Now in essential oils, most of them are going to have monos, sesquiterpenes, and diterpenes. The triterpenes are hard to find in essential oils unless they're cold pressed, or you do something like with frankincense, um, where you have a defined distillation process. Because these larger molecules, they come off later in the distillation process. The smaller the molecule, the more volatile it is. So when you distill essential oils, the monoterpenes come off first, sesquiterpenes come off second, diterpenes come off third. These are very large and they're not very volatile. They want to stay in the liquid phase because they're a larger molecule. So it's hard to get them to distill into the vapor phase. So, but with like frankincense resin, if you do the distillation right, you can get the triterpenes like the boswellic acids that come out of frankincense. Those are all triterpenes. There's like 26 of them, different boswellic acids, these different triterpenes. So you have to distill the oil properly to get these larger molecules. But the thing I want you to notice is all of these molecules have this conjugated bond structure because they have the double, single, double that's strung together. And I'll show you an example here. Here's an isoprene unit. So here's isoprene, right? So I'm showing you these different colored molecules. I just made it simpler to see. You can see this is an isoprene, this is an isoprene, this is an isoprene. You have 4 isoprene molecules here. I just rotated them different ways, okay? Now I'm going to connect them together. See that? I took the 4 isoprene molecules, so this would be what? A diterpene. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 isoprenes. Each has 5. So 4 times 5 is 20 carbons now. But now I've got to connect them together with chemical bonds. Boom. Now I have single, double, single, double, single, double, single, double. And that's a conjugated bond system. Okay? So that's going to make a very beautiful antioxidant molecule. So all of the constituents in an essential oil, you know, the average essential oil has 20 at the low end to 300 different constituents, and all of these constituents are built off these types of structures. So they all have antioxidant capacity in different forms. All right? So some of you have heard about ORAC values in the ORAC scale, and there's some things I want to talk about there with antioxidant. So the ORAC scale is an assay that's done in a test tube, and it tries to measure one very specific antioxidative mechanism. So when you think about oxidation, in general, it's just stealing an electron away, right? That's what it is. But you can have any molecule steal an electron away from another molecule. You can have molecule A steal an electron away from molecule B. You can have molecule A steal an electron from molecule C. So you can have tens of thousands or millions of different combinations of molecule A and B where the electron is being transferred from one to another. Those are all different oxidative events. All right, and that can happen in the cell. So the commonality is an electron was transferred, but the differences are the molecular structure from the one molecule transferring to the other is completely different. The ORAC scale only measures one very specific reaction. And so then what they do is they add in whatever molecule they want to measure the antioxidative potential of, like some essential oil molecule or vitamin C. They add it to the test tube, and they see if it blocks this oxidative reaction of this one very specific reaction. Okay, and then they try to measure the antioxidant potential of this one molecule. And it's true, but only for that one reaction. Okay, so the ORAC scale can give you a relative scale, but you have to keep in mind that it's really only for that one very specific reaction. So to give you an example, this graph right here shows you the ORAC values of the different essential oils. So this one on the left is clove, and it says the highest. It's over a million on the ORAC scale. The next one is myrrh, and then citronella, coriander, fennel, clary sage, German chamomile, cedarwood. You can see these are the different ORAC values of the different essential oils. You come out here, you're looking at sage. I'm sorry, my screen is cutting off. Valerian, orange. Okay, you might say, well, these essential oils don't have very high antioxidative potential because they're low on the ORAC score. Well, let me show you why that's not true. So if you look at this study here, they used a different assay to measure antioxidative potential, a different reaction where electrons are being transferred and its ability to block it. And you can see here that, clove did really well on this reaction, but so did oregano and thyme. Oregano was almost as high as clove with this other assay. But if you look at the ORAC measurement, you find that oregano and thyme are way down here, and clove is here, okay? So different scales give you different results because there's different ways you can transfer an electron from one molecule to another because there's tens of thousands of different types of molecules. So what you need is, there's no one, let me put it this way, there's no one antioxidant that can block every oxidative reaction. Let me say it again. There's no one antioxidant that can block every oxidative reaction. All right, so people say, well, I'm going to take vitamin C because it's a great antioxidant. That's true, but only for certain reactions, right? Clove has constituents in there, great antioxidants, but only for specific reactions. So there's no one molecule. So if there's tens of thousands of different ways for oxidation between molecules to occur, then you need different antioxidant molecules that can block each one of those or neutralize each one of those. Because what I was saying earlier, where the antioxidant wants to donate an electron, here, it was kind of simplified what I was saying here. This yellow guy wants to donate one to the blue guy. But they have to match, okay? So like this antioxidant has to be able to do that. It wants to give an electron away, but these two molecules have to be able to interact with each other to make that happen. So there's not one antioxidant that can block every reactive oxygen species or every molecule that's been oxidized in the chain. There has to be different types of antioxidants that can do that. All right, so that's the beauty and that's the power of essential oils, because where else in the planet are you going to find a combination of molecules that are all antioxidant in nature but all different from one another? That's why essential oils are great antioxidants, because they create this diversity of antioxidants that can block the different pathways. So don't get fixated on the ORAC scale. I know a lot of people do, and they put it all in the usage books. But by that, you would think, well, this essential oil is a terrible, lemongrass is a really bad antioxidant. That's not true. It's just bad in the ORAC scale because it's only one very specific reaction. Okay? And I showed you an example where that's not true there. So how do you get rid of reactive? Let's see, what time is it? I still got 10 minutes. All right. So how do you reduce oxidative stress in your body? So obviously, changing your diet and getting the toxic stuff out of your diet by removing pesticides is a big one. So the less pesticides you eat, the less oxidative stress you'll have in your body. The less processed foods you eat, the less oxidative stress you have in your body. Now, the cleaning products used in your home, changing those out to natural plant-based products. Why not change your cleaner from an oxidant to something that's an antioxidant? Why not make your cleaners antioxidant in nature and use less toxic cleaners? So use plant-based natural cleaners like the Thieves product line is a perfect example of that. Exercise will reduce oxidative stress in your body. Your weight can play a big role in oxidative stress and inflammation because adipocytes, which are fat cells, those produce adipokines or chemokines that actually are inflammatory. They're basically signaling molecules that tells your immune system to ramp up inflammation. And then inflammation generates reactive oxygen species, and it's doing that cycle I was showing you earlier. So fat cells can add to chronic inflammation and oxidative stress in your body just by the presence of the adipocytes themselves. So maintaining a healthy weight. De-stressing. So stress, psychological stress can produce oxidative stress in your body because your brain controls the organs of your body and the hormones in your body. So psychological stress does translate into physiological oxidative stress in your body. And so de-stressing through aromatherapy, which is known through clinical trials, plenty of papers in PubMed to describe aromatherapy being used to lower cortisol, to lower stress, anxiety, and all of those things. So just having diffusers going in your house at your bedtime, around the house, in the kitchen, having those going, it's not just making your house smell nice, but it is lowering the stress in your body, physiological stress, and lowering the oxidative stress in your body. When you lower that, you're reducing inflammation, okay? So the other thing you can do once you do all those things is to actually use antioxidant molecules and exogenously and get them into your body. What are the best ones? Well, plants, fruits and vegetables, but also, like I just showed you, essential oils. So this is why everyone should use essential oils every day, because you'll have these molecules in your body, these little antioxidants that will block the oxidative reactions taking place. And then why are you doing that? To slow down the rate at which your DNA is being damaged and the rate at which damage is accumulating in the DNA as it's being copied, protecting your DNA. So I already said this, there's lots of different ways oxidative reactions can occur between different molecules. So there's not a one size fits all. This one antioxidant is all you need. Like wolfberries are great as being antioxidant in nature. They have a lot of polyphenols in them and molecules that have the conjugated bond system I was showing you earlier. But it's not the end all be all either. So the more diversity you have in terms of the number of different types of antioxidant molecules you have, the better. You need a multi-molecule, multifaceted approach. The key is diversity and rotation. So if you want to use essential oils to minimize oxidative stress, here's my key tips for you. Make a list of single oils that have good antioxidant potential. Again, don't just use the ORAC scale. All of them are going to have pretty good antioxidant potential, okay? And each oil has its own set of constituents, and each constituent by itself is a different antioxidative potential. So just get some oils that you like, actually. This would be pretty good. And just use one blend per day. And I would change it out every day. So, get 3 oils. Don't do more than 3 oils in a blend. I think you're getting more than 3. You're just complicating things too much. So go with 3 oils, make a blend. Each day of the week, change it out. Now apply it to the bottom of your feet or your abdomen if you don't like to apply it to the bottom of your feet. Why is that? Because oxidation is a process that occurs 24/7 when you're sleeping, when you're walking around. Oxidation is occurring. DNA is being damaged, like I said, 1,000,000 times per day per cell. So you want these molecules in your bodies at all time. Now, if you just apply it to your skin or behind your ear, what happens is you get a rapid spike in concentration of essential oil molecules in your plasma of your blood, traveling throughout your cells, but then that spike goes away in a couple hours. Not bad. It's just not going to be with you all day long. If you put it at the bottom of your feet, you have a very thick pad of adipose tissue on the bottom of your feet, and that will be like a time release capsule, a mechanism to slowly release the essential oil molecules over time into your bloodstream. So it's like a time release capsule, and it will last 24 hours. Same thing with your abdomen, especially if you got a little jiggle in your belly. there's good there's good padding there, and it will slowly release. So essential oils have an affinity for fat. They like to hang around with fat molecules. So if you put them in the bottom of your feet or your abdomen, they'll tend to hang out there, but they won't hang out there forever. Your body eventually releases them and eventually gets rid of them, but fat tissue releases essential oils molecules the slowest out of any tissue in the body. So now you have a time release mechanism, right? So that's why you want to do that. And the key again is diversity and rotation because of the different oxidative pathways that you want to affect. So I actually have designed 7 different recipes for Monday through, every day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, through Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And there's a set of digital recipe cards, and you can make up these blends. They each have 3 oils in them. So that's in my USB drive. So I have all my classes in there, but I also have my recipes. And one of the set of the recipes that I have is for protecting your DNA. And the way I design these is I try to blend oils together that were synergistic in terms of affecting multiple oxidative pathways simultaneously, and then changing that from day to day so that you're basically throughout the week hitting all the different pathways. So that's on the USB drive. If you want to check that out, you go to starfishsense.com. You can get all of that. If you order any 2 things, you want to get a book or something else with the memory stick, you get 30% off the entire order. So it's a good deal. So that's it. And then remember that when a woman says smell this, it's probably an essential oil. When a man says this, you better run.